Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Drums and Drams. My name's Cameron, and today we're gonna be taking a look at the brand new 2024 George T. Stagg. This is clocking in at 136.1 proof or 68.05% ABV. It's coming to us from the highly regarded Buffalo Trace Antique Collection, of which I have only ever owned one single bottle for myself, and that's because I paid an arm and a freaking leg for it on the secondary market. That was for a 2008 George T. Stagg, and it's really because these older editions of Stagg, like 08, 09 in particular, 2010, 2016 as well, some of these older GTSs are some of the best whiskeys, in my opinion, that have been released, maybe ever, but certainly in the last 10 to 20-ish years. In recent years, I feel like it's been very hit or miss with a lot of these different releases. If you want to just focus on George T. Stagg, I think 2022, for many people, was a good batch. For me, this grassy note in the finish kind of detracted from the whiskey. Then you go into 2023, and I just didn't think that was very good. Probably the worst GTS that I've ever had, 2023. So now you get to 2024, and I have high hopes, but kind of only medium expectations for this one. And all that to say, the older ones were really great. They've been very much hit or miss nowadays. And so at 136 proof, we're at a solid proof point here. We're a little over 15 years of age for this one. I'm looking forward to diving into this. So I want to say very quickly, thank you to my buddy Justin for lending me this bottle, letting me take some pours out of it, spend some time with this whiskey. And so now it's time to get onto this review. No comparisons in this video, purely focusing on the 2024. Let's go to the nose now and see what we get. All right, guys, so this pretty much has anything and everything that you could possibly want from a highly aged, dark, rich Kentucky straight bourbon. Again, coming in just over 15 years old, I think what you start to get in a Buffalo Trace bourbon profile at this age, and especially at this proof, you're starting to get into some things that you're not gonna find on other products from them. You're not gonna find this in Weller Full Proof or in Stagg Jr. or E.H. Taylor Barrel Proof. Those are comparable in some ways. Some of the base profile notes, the fruitiness that you get from Buffalo Trace, those cherry syrup notes, maybe grape, maybe some of those honey notes. But what you don't get there that you do get in this 2024 George T. Stagg is rich leather notes, like dark, intense leather. You get these burnt caramels that would be most likened to maybe like a Stagg Jr., but it's so much richer here. And I think where the complexity starts to really shine for me in this George T. Stagg, at least so far on the nose, is in the fact that you get so many varieties of fruit notes. And so let me kind of expand on that a little bit. If you think about cherry and raspberry and grape, which are kind of standard fruit notes for Buffalo Trace, when you smell them in this George T. Stagg, you don't just get fresh fruit, you don't just get dry fruit, and you don't just get candied fruit, which are three very distinct styles of fruit notes, right? Like dried fruit is typically older whiskeys, you get those. Candied fruit notes, maybe some younger whiskeys, you'll have those. And fresh fruit is, it's kind of middle of the road. But in this George T. Stagg, you get all three of those. You get like all of these berry notes and these dark cherry notes and these grapey kind of plummy qualities as well. And you get them dry, you get them fresh, you get them candied. And that adds all of these layers and complexities to the whiskey. So when you have all of those fruit notes packed in, and they're so concentrated and reduced and cooked down, along with these unique leather notes. Like the leather in George T. Stagg is not like leather in Knob Creek. It's not like leather in other Jim Beam products or Heaven Hill products or MGP. It's very much its own thing. You get intense, almost musty oak, but also sweet oak. Like, again, I'm talking complexity, I'm talking layers, and that's what's so cool about this George T. Stagg on the nose. I guess what I really want to say is that the nose on this is absolutely doing it for me. I think it smells freaking amazing. And so I'm hoping the palate really lives up to that, because it's got big shoes to fill. I think from prior years, it has low expectations from the most recent years, but the way that this thing is nosing, it's setting it up to be a great whiskey. So let's get it now on the palate. Cheers. All right, so this is very, very intense whiskey. Like my eyes are probably watering at this point. 136 proof, 136.1. It's high, it's not absurd, it's not hazmat, but George T. Stagg is known to drink a little bit hot. This one certainly does, but it backs up all of that heat and all of that kind of ethanol punch with enough flavor to really make it meaningful at this proof. And so the first thing I get is just this rush of kind of dry, exotic spices on the front of the palate. I'm talking like cinnamon stick, which is not exotic, I know. But then you get into a little bit of clove, a little bit of like this cardamom type thing. It's aromatic, again, a little exotic, little cola spice, maybe like Dr. Peppery as well on the front. And then as it starts to roll back, it is attacking your mouth. I mean, that's like kind of a weird thing to say maybe, but it's attacking your mouth. And as it rolls back, it starts to expand. So the beginning of this is like a punch in the tongue. It's very pointed. Then it starts to expand as it develops. And that expansion brings with it a lot of those really, really dark caramel notes. People are gonna probably call this like a burnt caramel, a burnt toffee. And then the fruit notes just continue to blossom into the finish. And that's where you pick up on all of those complexities like I talked about on the nose, the dry, the candied, and the fresh fruit. And now as I'm into a very long finish, I would say that I'm left with a lot of that musty oak, that leather that you get from these George T. Staggs, as well as a little bit of this lingering cherry in the background. So first sip, I know I went into some detail there on the notes, but experientially, I think it's gonna kick you in the mouth. You have to be ready for it. It's not balanced necessarily, I wouldn't say, but it just takes over your palate. It has that kind of like Coy-Hill effect where when you're drinking this, it's gonna let you know you're drinking it. So with that said, let's go back in now for a second sip. I mean, this is just phenomenal whiskey. On the front of the palate, on that second sip, as I'm getting acclimated to the proof, it's kicking me in the teeth just a little bit less. Now I'm picking up on like this antique leather, antique wood, almost slightly dusty element on the front of the palate. And I'm actually kind of now noticing this dark honey note. It's a combination of like a really dark honey, but also like a hot honey because this is so spicy. And that's very reminiscent of Buffalo Trace products, but you would never really notice, I think, those honey notes on the first sip because it's so aggressively spicy. But now I get these antique notes and this honey, which is a little bit more delicate and a little bit more refined. And then again, as it rolls back, same kind of effect as the first sip. Those fruit notes take over the mid palate. And it's just a freaking cherry bomb at that point. And you're just kind of on a roller coaster ride of fruits and spices. A little bit of vanilla in there as well, a little vanilla cream note. I love that note in a highly aged whiskey. And then as it gets into the finish, again, long finish, a little bit drying, but I think that's okay given the experience. It's kind of, it's in context that this would be a little bit drying. So for me, 2024 George T. Stagg, this is a home run whiskey. And I know people don't like to talk necessarily about what is the most that you would pay for this, but I think it's worth talking about, right? This is BTAC, 125 is SRP, and you gotta be real friggin' lucky or know somebody or win a raffle to get this at 125. And so you're more realistically looking at either secondary prices or at least some degree of markup. I would say for me, this is in the $400-ish range of what I would want to pay. I think the top end of what I would want to pay if I'm feeling crazy that day is like $500. And I know a lot of people are going to balk at that, and that's okay because whiskey prices have inflated so much along with everything else in the world these days. And I think this bottle at $125, frankly, is unrealistic. I don't think the SRP should be $125. I think it should be more like $250. And that's not because I want to pay more for it. It's just because the flippers, they see this at 125 and they're making a lot of money on this, flipping it for $850, which is the current secondary price. So I wouldn't hate to see the SRP go up a little bit on these and reflect, in many cases, the quality of the whiskey, although there are some off years. And to that point, I would just say that even though I'm not doing comparisons in this video, I think this 2024 beats the crap out of the 2023. That was the 135 proofer. And for me personally, I would have to do these side by side, and I might actually be doing that soon in a blind flight. I still think this is gonna beat the 2022 for me because this doesn't have that grassy note in the finish. That 2022 was, I believe, 138.7 proof if you guys are trying to reference these. So this one at 136.1, 2024, it's amazing whiskey. I think it's probably top 10 of the year for me. That's gonna do it, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments. Like, comment, subscribe, cheers, and I'll see you guys soon here on Drums and Drams.